Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Code Show. My name is Michael Zornick, and in this episode, we're going to continue building our conference application. On screen, you can see where we left off, where we basically have a iOS application with a table view, and inside of this table view, kind of a designed custom cell showing off the title, speaker, and room location of each session. In this session or this in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to continue to evolve this. If you remember in our original design, we had each of the sections, we had sections for each of the kind of time slots of the conference. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add that kind of information to the model and then add some tools to kind of help the table view kind of get those different sections. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we'll go to our model, which is just a session. And we're going to add two new properties to this. So we're going to add let starts at, and it's going to be of type date, and let ends at, and it's going to be of type date. Now, if you're coming from another system, date is a single point in time. So it represents both the day as well as the time. So it's a single point in time. Other languages will kind of separate date and time. And it's very susceptible to bugs. Working with dates as a programmer is a very challenging thing. And one of the things you'll notice as we look at some of the source code here is that there are special ways to kind of construct dates if you're trying to match specific days and months and times to make sure that you match the calendar of the user and therefore like the location of the user, if they're like Eastern Standard Time or Pacific Standard Time, if it's Daylight Savings Time or not, all that fun stuff. So we'll get started with that. Now, if you look back here in the session list view controller, you'll notice we had a method here that loads fake data. And so what I'm going to do here is, you also notice that it's currently complaining now that we've added these new properties. Those new properties aren't inside of the initializer. What we're going to do is we're going to take some code I've written in practice file. And the reason for that is that there's this kind of balance in these videos of like showing me typing and kind of talking about bigger ideas. And so we're going to kind of cut a little bit of that out. So what I would like to do here is add a file to the project. And so what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to do this in the Finder first. So if we go to Red Arrow, you go to Models, the first thing I'm going to do is take my new file called SampleData.swift, and I'm going to place that in there. And then inside of the project, I'm going to add a reference to that file. So I'll say add files. And you can see it's the one that's like not kind of disabled because it's not currently in the project. You can tap on options and I'll show you all the different options. You definitely want to make sure it's part of the red arrow target. And you'll hit add. And so now we have SampleData.swift. So what this file is all about is kind of replacing that load fake data with a little bit more evolved data. And so the way this starts is we just have a struct, and it has a property called sessions, which is an array of the session object. And to build that, what I do is I first just create an array of dictionaries. And the idea there is that it's just kind of an easy way for a programmer to kind of come in here and just generate some data they need to kind of satisfy a scenario. In the future, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using JSON files to kind of handle that. But that's a whole other kind of topic. And, let's talk about one thing at a time. And so I have this collection of dictionaries. And then what I do here is I basically just iterate through that collection, taking each dictionary, generating a session for it, and then appending it to my sessions collection, and then I return that for the actual property value. The other interesting thing here that's going on is, so starts at and ends at are both dates. And so you need to put a date in here. Now, if I were just to put date parentheses, you would end up with a date that represents now. And because we want to kind of program some behaviors, specifically, I'm looking to kind of have dates that are like of today and of yesterday and things like that, or at a specific date and time. You're going to want to construct dates a little bit more manually. So down here at the bottom, we have our little private function we created called event date, and it takes in a day delta, an hour, and a minute. And the idea is that, while we're kind of building this application up, when we need to kind of fake stuff, we're going to do it with the idea that we have a multi-day conference, and we want to be able to kind of quickly create dates that represent hours and minutes. Because if you look up here at the session info, you can see that like the idea is that a session would start at like 10 o'clock and would end at 10:50. And so we want to be able to save that. And then we also want to be able to control the day delta, meaning like this session happens on the first day, and this session called, Where's AppleScript happens on the second day, which is just a delta of 1. So down here, we have our function that takes in those arguments. And the way we're going to generate a date is we're going to use an object called the NSDate components. And by using these, basically, it lets you kind of manually say, I'm looking for a specific year, specific month, day, hour, minute, second. And then once you have that information, you can basically ask the calendar to generate a date instance. And the reason, again, you want this is because there's lots of scenarios where you're going to run into things like daylight savings time and things of, where you don't want to mess it up. So we're going to make some hard code assumptions and just assume that it's going to, this conference that we're faking right at the moment is happening in 2018. It's happening in February. It starts on the 19th. And then everything else is kind of handled by the arguments that come in. This does return an optional. So in a production environment, you would definitely want to check that, because this is kind of a fake data, just, mock-up scenario. We're just going to bang that out and just new data or new date, and just return it. And so that's what's getting returned in the dictionary. And then when we create our session objects, because this isn't a dictionary, we have to cast them. And so that looks a little bit ugly, but again, because this is kind of just for sample data, I'm not really too worried about it. So with the sample data, that's basically going to replace this load fake data. And I'll just delete that, and I'll delete the call to it. So now we need to decide what do we want to do to kind of model out this table view. So historically, you can see that we just had a flat array of sessions. And what we need to do is we need to kind of create groups. So basically, for the kind of like the 10 o'clock block of sessions, you'll see them, collected, in the same group. And then you'll see the 11 o'clock block. And then, there's lunch. And so then there's the 1 o'clock block. And then, in our sample data, we have some events for the next day, which start, I believe, at 10 o'clock. So we need to kind of go through our sample data and create those groups. Now, you could totally do that inside of this view controller, but, to help avoid the kind of massive view controller problem and to help improve the testability of the code, which we'll get into testing later, hopefully not too far down the road. What I decided to do here is create what we call a view model. And the goal of the view model is basically to kind of abstract the data needs of the view controller. Now, there are some people who will take this even a step further, who will follow a design practice called model view model, MVVM, which introduces the concept of bindings and keeping things in sync. And we're not going to go that far. We're just going to try and create the abstraction so that way we can have a dedicated object that is in charge of kind of building this group system and handling that for us. And so once again, I'm going to kind of bring in something that I wrote on the side. Before we do that, I'm actually going to create a group here for the session list. Excuse me. So I'm highlighting those 3 files. I want to create a new group from selection, and I'm going to call this session list. And then in the Finder, next to our view controller, I'm going to take this view model I created, and then we're going to jump back to Xcode, and I'm just going to add that reference to that file. It's just called session list view model. And so in this view model, at the very, very top, we have created a struct called session group. I find it very helpful that even in very small scope scenarios, if it benefits you to create a type to help you work through your stuff rather than rely on like a dictionary or something to do just that. And so we need something to help us define groups. And so I've created the session group for us. Now, what's going to happen is when you initialize the session list view model, it's going to create a reference to the sample data file, which we created a second ago, and that's going to give us access to the sessions. Now, once we have the sessions, we want to actually generate our groups. And so I've created a function here called build groups. And this is a little bit verbose. There's probably a tighter functional way to do this. I tend to still regress to the looping styles that I've been using forever, but if you're a more functional programmer and you want to refactor this, then definitely go for it. The idea is that we want to grab all of the unique dates, and remember dates represent both date and time, in our collection of sessions, so we kind of understand the blocks that are scheduled. And then for each one of those dates, grab every session that matches that exact date, and then create the group from that. So, and then once you have all the groups, we'll just assign that to our property session groups. Now, this will create the session groups, but in fact, when we're actually displaying this to the users, there's this kind of expectation that we're going to be showing them in a specific order. And so in addition to making the session groups public, I've also created a property called ordered session groups. And inside of here, what we're going to do is we're just going to take the session group objects that we have in our array, and we're just going to sort them based off of the date property of that. So that way we get to see the list in the date order that we kind of expect. And that's it. It's a fairly simple view model, nothing too crazy. But the main property it's going to expose to us that we're interested in is the ordered session groups. And that's going to kind of replace what we use here at the top with sessions. So with that, we'll do a little bit of typing here, and we're going to change our list view controller to work with this new view model. So I'm going to type in view model, and instead of an array of session, this is going to be a representation of the session list view model. And we'll just create that right there. Again, because we're working with fake data, it's kind of going to have the data inside of it already. In a production app, you'd probably create the view model based off something you pass into it. And then once we have that, we're going to need to add a couple new table view delegate calls, so that way we can kind of say how many sections we have and what the headers should be. So number of sections in table view, we are going to return view model dot ordered session groups dot count. That's going to be our number of sections. And in addition to that, we're also going to want to return a title for header and section. And we'll just grab the section view model dot ordered session groups. And so we'd be given the section, so we'll just put that in the array to figure out which object we want, and then we will return section dot date. For now, for simplicity, I'm just going to return the description. In a future episode, we'll probably come back here and clean this up with a date formatter, but just kind of get us started. We'll do that. And now for this next one, we're going to need to update this. So number of rows in section. So the first thing we're going to want to grab is the section, and then the section is going to have a collection of sessions. I'm losing my... I love it when I lose my code formatting. Kind of love that. So yeah, just to verify, yeah, section group has sessions, and that'll be fine. So that will have a count. And our next one is generating the cell. So again, we're going to want to grab the first. Before that, we're going to want to grab the section, and then the section will provide the sessions, and we'll grab that from the row. And instead of section here, this needs to be indexpath.section. All right. That'll return the cell. Configure table view will remain the same for now. And let's hit stop and play and see where we stand. All right. So we end up with our table view, and it is changed. We now see sections. So we see 2018 February 19th, starting at military 1400 plus 000. So you can kind of see that it's, even though we told it to start at 10, because we're using our calendar, it kind of converted it to that natural, time. Now, when we present this with a formatter, that'll kind of come back to be 10 o'clock, but it's really good to see that it's doing the translation properly. We've got our first session, which represents that really long title like we had before. And then we've got our second group here for 1500, and it's got intro and advanced. And then we've got auto layout and iTunes Connect. And then on the 20th, we've got 2 more sessions. So that's looking pretty good. One thing to note, so these are all coming up ordered. I think like pretty much as the data was entered. You could probably think about doing a second level of ordering based off of maybe the room names or some level. So that way you had some level of consistency. Because in theory these could be swapped. Like you could see Advanced Swift on top and then Intro Swift being the second one listed. And that may or may not be an issue or not. I don't know. But cool. So yeah, we're definitely getting a little bit closer to our initial design that we had a couple episodes ago. And with that, we're gonna pause here and take a break. We'll definitely continue this in our next episode. In that next episode, I think what we'll do is we'll take care of the NS date formatter and clean that up, and handle any kind of other little behaviors that we want to clean up. So like one behavior that I'm not a fan of right now is probably the fact that you can select a table row, because there is nothing to do with that selection at the moment. In the future, probably we'll add a detailed view, but until then, if you're displaying a table view and there's nothing for the user to select, then they probably shouldn't be allowed to select it. So we'll handle a bunch of little stuff like that and kind of finish up phase 1 of the conference app. I hope you guys are having a good time with the show. If you guys have any questions or comments, please let me know. And thanks a lot for watching. We'll check you later. Bye-bye.